Welcome to Hellenic Heritage Journeys. Here, we share the fascinating stories hidden within Greece's archaeological sites. In every episode, we take a journey through space and time, uncovering the traces of people who lived, created, and left their mark thousands of years ago. Follow the thread of history with us from yesterday to today. This episode was created in collaboration with Marketing Greece. Imagine walking through an ancient city, among the remains of history bathed in the Macedonian sun. You lean over a pebble mosaic floor and notice something that makes you stop. A signature in ancient Greek, Gnosis epoisen. In other words, Gnosis made this. It is one of those moments when you become witness to an instant frozen in time. Suddenly, you learn the name of an artist who, more than 2,000 years ago, felt such pride in his work that he chose to protect it from being forgotten, leaving his mark for generations to come. But when you lift your gaze, you notice something even stranger. You are standing in the middle of a vast plain, surrounded by endless fields, and yet so much here speaks of the sea. From the decorative motifs in the mosaics to the very aura of the landscape. How could a city that now lies 25 kilometres from the coast once have stood beside the waves? How did a small town named Vounomos transform into the most brilliant capital of the Macedonian kingdom? In this episode, we will walk together through the streets of ancient Pella and discover how wealth, artistry, and strategic intelligence created one of the most important centers of the ancient world. Today, around the archaeological site of Pella, the silence of the plain stretches in every direction. But if you were to close your eyes and travel back 2,500 years to the 5th century BC, the sound you would hear would not be the rustle of wind through the trees in the fields, but the splash of waves against the shore. Why? Because at that time, Pella was a coastal city. The reformist king Archelaus, a man with a deep understanding of geopolitics, realized something his predecessors in Aeae had overlooked. In antiquity, power traveled by sea. Aeae, the first capital of the Macedonian kingdom, hidden among the hills of the Pierian mountains near today's Vergina, was a safe and sacred place, a stronghold of tradition. But it was strategically limited, almost blind to the world that stretched beyond the mountains. By contrast, Pella, around 53 kilometers northwest, combined multiple advantages. It had a harbour, and its fertile hinterland was ideal for agriculture and livestock. At the same time, it lay close to the kingdom's newly acquired territories. This natural advantage was seized by King Archelaus, who, at the end of the 5th century BC, decided to transfer the capital from Aeae to Vounomos, which became Pella. It was an outward-looking move that transformed Pella into the most important economic, political, and cultural center in Greece for the centuries that followed. Imagine the waters of the Thermaic Gulf reaching the very edge of the city, which was built at the foot of low hills. With the harbour of Pella, the Macedonian kingdom expanded its reach and strengthened its economy, both within the Greek world and beyond. Their ships could load the famed timber of the north and transport it to the great shipyards of southern Greece. And the products of the fertile hinterland, wheat, wine, and metals, found their way to the markets of the Mediterranean. But nature has its own silent way of reshaping history. The rivers of the region, the Loudias, the Axios, and the Aliakmon, had been at work for centuries. Year after year, each winter, they carried tons of mud and sediment down from the mountains and spread it across the mouths of the rivers. Gradually, the harbour began to grow shallow. The gulf filled in, the coastline shifted, and the sea receded. In its place, marshes, wetlands, and lagoons emerged, a new landscape that slowly covered the old. Today, when you hear that the sea lies 25 kilometres away, it is hard to believe. And yet, the drainage of Lake Yanitsa in the early 20th century was merely the final act of a story that had begun thousands of years earlier. The lake played an important role in the Macedonian struggle during the final years of Ottoman rule, but it was also the last trace of the sea that once reached the walls of ancient Pella. Pella is mentioned by the historians Herodotus and Thucydides, but Xenophon, another chronicler of the Greek world, does not present it simply as a city. He describes it as the largest city in Macedonia. And the geographer and historian Strabon later refers to it as the kingdom's most important commercial center, highlighting its pivotal role in the economic life of Macedon. Pella became a magnet for people of intellect and trade, a living organism that contributed daily to the cultural development of the Macedonian kingdom. Archelaus did not merely move the seat of administration here, he shifted the very center of gravity of Macedonia itself, decisively influencing the course of ancient Greek history. Pella was the place where Macedonia politically came of age, where Philip II of Macedon ruled in the 4th century BC, and where his son, Alexander the Great, was born and later proclaimed king. The city was organized and expanded by Philip II, and later by Cassander, one of Alexander's successors. By the end of the classical period, it had already become a great metropolis, built according to the Hippodamian grid system. The Hippodamian system was not simply a technical choice to the layout of a city. It represented a profound ideological shift, both in the city design of antiquity and in political thought itself. Imagine a vast grid, parallel streets intersecting at right angles to form uniform rectangular blocks. In Pella, this system was applied on an impressive scale. The streets were wide, with the main avenues reaching up to 9 meters across, routes you can still, in a sense, walk along today. This strict geometry allowed the city to breathe. Air from the Thermaic Gulf could circulate freely along the straight avenues, cooling the houses on the hottest days of summer. At the same time, this layout facilitated the movement of troops, goods arriving from the harbour, and the people who flooded the capital. It was, one might say, a city you could navigate with mathematical precision. But the true ingenuity lies where the eye could not reach, beneath the very surface of the streets. If you could lift away the earth and stones, you would see a labyrinthine yet meticulously organized underground network. Who would have thought that so many centuries ago, in ancient Greece, there existed a water supply system whose conception was not so far removed from our own? The engineers of the time constructed clay pipes carefully fitted together and made full use of the area's natural bedrock by carving underground channels that functioned as conduits. Through this subterranean system, water was channeled from nearby springs into homes across the city, where wells and fountains also helped meet the needs of its residents. In short, Pella evolved into a true metropolis of its time, a city that offered not only wealth and spectacle, but also quality of life. The economic power of Pella is evident in its luxurious houses decorated with mosaics. Step into the house of Dionysus or the house of Helen, which cover areas of up to 3,000 square meters. Imagine the scale of that. The rooms of these houses are arranged around large central courtyards adorned with Ionic and Doric columns. But their true magic lies in the floors, covered with mosaics featuring geometric patterns or figurative depictions crafted from pebbles likely gathered from the nearby rivers. One of the most characteristic examples is the mosaic from which the house of Dionysus takes its name, depicting the god himself riding a panther. Today, you can admire it at the Archaeological Museum of Pella. In a second house, located very close to that of Dionysus, 3 mosaic floors have so far been uncovered in its banquet rooms. One of them depicts a deer hunt with 2 young men attacking the animal with a sword and an axe, while at the same time their dog sinks its teeth into the terrified prey. The artist conveys the tension of the scene with remarkable intensity. This is the mosaic created by Gnosis. Remember him? The one whose signature, Gnosis Epoisen, allows us to admire not just an ancient work of art, but the artist who created it. In the adjoining, larger room lies the second mosaic of the house, depicting the abduction of Helen by Theseus. If you look closely, you can identify the figures from the inscriptions that name them. The figures are so vivid that you can almost hear the cries and feel the pulse of the scene. With such a luxurious and artistically accomplished mosaic, it is no coincidence that this room was called the House of Helen. The third mosaic of the house portrays a scene of an Amazonomachy, a battle between Greeks and Amazons. Both luxurious houses had a second story on their northern side, a deliberate and practical choice. The upper floor acted as a shield against the cold, northerly winds in winter, while also providing shade and coolness during the summer. The interior walls of the houses were coated with colorful plaster, a mixture of lime, sand, and water, which served not only a protective but also a decorative function. Their smooth surfaces were adorned with vivid paintings, the most elaborate of which imitated architectural elements, much like those we would see centuries later in the houses of Pompeii. An exquisite example of this technique was uncovered in the so-called House of Plaster, located just below the House of Helen, and is now exhibited at the Archaeological Museum of Pella. And now it is time to make your way towards the heart of the city, a complex of the Agora, the public square serving as a commercial and civic center of ancient cities. Covering an area of approximately 70,000 square meters, it is the largest agora ever built in the ancient Greek world. Imagine the buzz and the scents that once filled the space. Roads from the city's harbour led here, bringing goods from every corner of the known world. A central avenue divides the agora in two and formed part of the road that connected Pella with the cities of Thessaloniki and Edessa. 4 colonnaded galleries surround a vast open square. Behind them stood a host of shops and workshops where everything was sold: pottery, clay figurines, metalwork, and food. Archaeologists have found amphorae in the agora that once carried oil and wine from the Black Sea to as far away as the shores of Spain. In other words, we're talking about an extensive trade network that brought considerable wealth to Pella. In the southwest corner of the agora, you will come across the public archive, where the city's official documents were kept. The documents themselves, made of perishable materials such as papyrus and parchment, have not survived. But the clay ceilings used to secure them were preserved, reminding us of the administrative organization of this state. Many of these ceilings can be admired today at the Archaeological Museum of Pella. Of the 4 galleries that surrounded the square, the northern gallery was the exception. The atmosphere here was more formal, as this was where the city's administrative offices were housed. Within this gallery, there was also a hall believed to have served a religious purpose, since 2 Hellenistic statues were discovered there, one of a Silenus and one of a female figure. Above the agora, a sanctuary dedicated to Kiveli, the mother of the gods, and to Aphrodite, overlooked the city. In the southern part of the city, you will find the sanctuary of Daron, a healing god. There were large open spaces here along with areas used for ritual meals. In the same area, the public bath was also discovered. Imagine the luxury: changing rooms, a pool, baths and heated chambers. Beneath these rooms ran underground passages that channeled warm air under the floors. A technology that still feels strikingly modern today. The area was also filled with workshops. The kilns burned day and night, firing clay and forging metal. Pella was a city that produced, that created, a city that never stood still. At the highest point of the city, on the Acropolis, stood the Palace of Pella. Covering an area of 75,000 square meters, it formed the administrative center of the entire kingdom. It was strategically positioned there, overseeing the city, the harbour, and the surrounding region. Here, we can imagine King Archelaus hosting distinguished figures such as Euripides, who died and was buried in Macedonia, Agathon, another celebrated playwright of his time, and the renowned painter Xerxes, as part of his effort to foster the cultural development of the kingdom. Of course, the city was surrounded by strong defensive walls, and beyond them lay the cemeteries, where its inhabitants were laid to rest. Many of them, the very people who had built this marvel. Pella flourished for centuries, until 168 BC, when the kingdom fell into Roman hands. A powerful earthquake in the early 1st century BC brought its story to a close. The city was gradually abandoned, the sea receded, and Pella disappeared beneath the earth. As you walk among the ruins, remember that you are walking through a city that was born of water and faded when the sea withdrew. Pella was not merely a capital. It was the vision of a kingdom that sought to make the entire world its horizon. Take one last look at those pebbles in the mosaics, stones from the rivers transformed into works of art, proving that greatness lies not in costly materials, but in how you use what your land provides. So perhaps, in the end, it was not only Gnosis who sought to protect his creation from being forgotten, but the entire city that ensured its memory would endure. This is where our journey comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed the story and the path we shared. If you'd like to discover more of Greece's cultural treasures, follow our channel, Hellenic Heritage Journeys, on Spotify. Until next time.